All right, it is 2 o'clock on this Friday afternoon. I think we're still missing a few grant review committee members, but I'm going to go ahead and get started and hope that folks trickle in as we get into the presentation a little bit. So welcome everyone to the Illegal Marijuana Market Enforcement Grant Review Committee meeting. We're going to be looking at the 2025-27 biennium solicitation today and gathering your feedback on what else you might want to see in the solicitation review process. Just a reminder, this is a public meeting, so we will be recording it. We have if you guys have questions, please raise your hand so we can get those on the record and make sure they're addressed appropriately. I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, so here is our agenda for today. First, we're going to do a quick roll call and overview. Then we're going to look at the solicitation. Then we're going to get into the GRC roles and responsibilities in the application review. We have a quick public comment period, just 5 minutes set aside. I know we have at least one person who contacted me with public comments. So we'll have that towards the end of the meeting, and then we'll talk about next steps. So first we'll get into roll call and overview.
Rima, are you trying to share? Are you sharing a screen because I can't see it?
Yeah, there is a presentation up. Are folks not able to see it?
I can see it.
Okay.
I can see it.
Okay,
Right,
let me leave and then come back in.
Okay.
No problem.
So we'll just give her 1 minute to come back on. And I did want to say, I guess while we're waiting, I did want to give a big thank you to all the folks that showed up and submitted testimony for the CJC budget hearing yesterday. We're very appreciative of all of the great testimony for folks that showed up in person and submitted. So thank you very much for that. All right, so let's get into roll call. Tyler, are you here?
Tyler Bechtel here.
Thank you. Rob, are you present?
I'm here.
All right, thank you, Rob. Aaron? And he didn't respond, so that's not a surprise. Chris, are you present?
Yes, I'm here as well.
All right, welcome. Thank you for showing up. Kathy?
Yes. Here.
All right, welcome, Kathy. And Craig actually had some last minute things that he needed to accomplish for the legislature, so he is unable to attend this afternoon. Shannon? No, Shannon. And
No,
then,
I'm here. Sorry.
oh, shit. Sorry, I didn't give you long enough. Welcome, Shannon. And then we actually have a new member today. Our previous Department of Agriculture contact actually retired, so we're welcoming Sunny Summers as a new GRC member today. So welcome, Sunny.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm here.
Good afternoon. Thank you. And Tim. All right. I don't see Tim. So thank you guys all for showing up. Hopefully you folks are all familiar with the background of this grant so far. Up on the slide, we have a brief, history of the different funding amounts back from when the grant program was first started in 2018. As you can see, it's fluctuated a lot from an initial investment of about $3 million to last year in the biennium, which we had a $5 million plus our $6 million biennial allotment for this program. So it's gone up and down a lot. And what I want to actually focus on here is that the contract periods were extended back when there was a big influx of money in 2021, 2022, with that 20 million in funds. Our contracts periods were extended till the end of December of this year, actually. So I think as a point of reference for everyone, just so we're all on the same page, we are trying to shift back to a normal biennium contract period for this RFGP that we're going to be looking at. So for the 2025-2027 biennium, our program period is going to be October 1st, 2025 through August 30th, 2027. So just keep that in the back of your mind, and we'll get into the allocation here on the next slide. So currently we have about 7.5 million available to award for this biennium. There is the HB 5005, our CJC budget bill -1, which includes an additional 11 million appropriation. We won't know if that 11 million is approved until the legislative session closes out. But we wanted to make sure and start the solicitation process earlier rather than later, so folks could start, writing that narrative. It always takes a few months to get through the whole process. We want to make sure that there's no gap in funding or lag in funding for our current grantees. So we're going to be doing a two-part solicitation, with the first part of the solicitation, which will just be narrative responses, released May 1st of this year. I do want to note also that since we won't have the total funding amount until the first part of the solicitation actually comes back in, until we get those applications and review them. So there may, when we get that final amount, there may also be at that point in time space to determine whether the GRC wants to recommend a portion of the funds be awarded to eligible CBOs, similar to how we've done in the past. Like when we got that big influx of money and there was the 6 million set aside for CBOs, we may want to do something like that, but we won't make that decision until we know what the final funding amount is. Yeah, as I said, we'll have that two-part solicitation. We'll get into the timeline in a minute. But other than that, there are no notable changes from our previous solicitations. Do we have any questions or comments or concerns so far? All right. So jumping into the solicitation itself, as I said, here's the timeline. So we're going to try and open up May 1st, which is very quickly approaching. The preliminary application deadline is going to be June 12th. And again, that's just going to be the narrative questions. We'll go through what they are a little further on in this presentation. In July, we'll have, a final confirmation of what that appropriation is going to be for this biennium. We'll also set another GRC meeting to evaluate those preliminary applications and get feedback to the applicants, similar to what we did in our last round of funding last year when Safety Compass applied. And then we'll open that final application, and applicants will have a chance then to, maybe submit their budget based on your feedback and the priorities that kind of come out, respond to any questions or concerns that the GRC brings up, and submit that final application. So those will be due August 21st. We'll meet again in September to do the final funding recommendations, and then bring that in front of the commission in October. So it's a little bit of an extended process, but like I said, we want to get it started as quickly as possible, so that there isn't that lag in funding. Again, as I mentioned, the project period is going to be October 1st to August 30th, and we're trying to align all of our project periods so they start either July, September, October, depending on when we can get the RFGPs out, and then they end in August instead of ending in July. So grantees have a little bit of cushion to kind of close out that project period, but we're not doing an extended project period like we have done and running into December or the next biennium. So eligible applicants for this grant are cities and counties and CBOs or any combination of the above. I did also want to point out that we have 2 program types, and these aren't in the rules or in statute, but this is just more on the budget planning side of things. Established programs that have been funded by this program previously can either choose a start date of October 1st or a later start date of January 1st if they're anticipating that their funds are going to get them all the way to December 31st. They can choose to start up in the new year. If they think they're going to run out, they can choose to start up October 1st. And then the new programs that have not been funded under this grant can start October 1st. And here's just a reminder of what our legislative priorities and commission priorities are. So legislative priorities are rural areas, large-scale operations, organized crime, diversion of marijuana outside of Oregon, and then the ongoing humanitarian crisis associated with illegal marijuana grows. And the commission priorities are funding training opportunities, addressing cases that require complex financial accounting, tracking outcomes, collaboration with other agencies and organizations, and then providing trauma-informed and culturally and linguistically specific and responsive services. So those are the same as they have always been, or since the last few years of this grant. On top of that, applicants will need to be knowledgeable and respond to or make sure that their programs are responsive to the administrative rules, the grant administration guide, and then anything else we include in the RFGP. Any questions or concerns before we get into the actual questions? Nope. All right. So again, this looks very similar to the last RFGP we did for those 2023-25 funds where we got 1 applicant. We just have some kind of overview questions in the beginning so applicants can describe what problem that program seeks to address, geographic scope of the program, the impacts of the illegal marijuana market that they're seeing in their community, and the lack of resources that they're trying to bring resources in to solve. Then they'll be asked to describe what the program funds will be used to do, their desired outcomes, and then have some simple yes or no questions that are targeted specifically at those legislative priority elements and those commission priority elements. So, mark yes for one of those 6 legislative priority elements, and then how that proposed program addresses that priority element. The initial CJC staff review is going to happen after that first preliminary application is due. And similar to how we do with all of our grant programs, CJC staff will review the applications for completeness and eligibility. We use a scoring sheet for that. And this rubric just goes through all of those questions. Like I said, says how responsive was the applicant to these questions. And this rubric is a way to organize the responsiveness of the applications and make sure folks have responded to all of the eligibility criteria and all of the preferences and priorities. It's an analytical tool, but the staff don't use it for any type of decision making. And then during the staff analysis, when we're preparing for that first grant review committee meeting, we can incorporate any feedback from you folks that you have on what kinds of information you want to see in the staff analysis as well. For example, when we presented the request for grant proposals to the commission at the middle of last month, they requested that we include program performance data for grantees that are reapplying, that are funded now, and they're applying for funds again in this next cycle. So that's something that we'll also incorporate into the presentation that we come up with for that grant review committee meeting. Once we review that, we'll collect your questions and comments, send them to the applicants, then we'll open the final application. And at that point, applicants can, edit their response to any of those questions that we just went over or provide additional clarification. And then they'll also have an opportunity to upload their budget sheet. And at that time, we'll have an idea of what the budget will be and if there's going to be any set aside for the CBOs. So those instructions will also be, sent out with the questions from you folks when we open the final application. Any questions or comments at this point? You feel like there's anything missing from the RFGP? We kept it pretty simple since that has worked well for this program in the past, but we're always open to recommendations and comments by you folks since you're the experts in the field. Well, we're moving very quickly today. Oh, Rob, looks like your hand is up. What would you like to say?
Well, I could, and just add for information. So the -1 amendments to House Bill 5005 were part of the hearing yesterday. And what they do, just for everyone's knowledge, is provide another $11 million into the IMM EGP fund so we can continue current service level for the full biennium. As was just explained, this program operates off a $6 million baseline off the top of marijuana taxes based on 2018 legislation we worked on. And then we're going to have roughly a $5 million carryover from the big allocation we got during COVID. And that leaves $11 million shortfall to bring it to a $22 million biennial program. But my reason for wanting to talk right now is actually to explain that the -1 amendments, which are posted under testimony to House Bill 5005, actually do have the allocations for the community-based organizations separate from law enforcement because we need both buckets filled. So it would fill both buckets. And my real comment here is, I think we had a really good hearing yesterday. I think everybody generally was positive. I was watching the faces of the members, and I talked to quite a number of members anyways. And so I think we got a lot of good momentum to get the full bucket filled back up for both law enforcement and the CBOs for the victim services. We had a couple of sheriffs testify about how important this program is. We also had, I think it was 4 victims advocates talk about the services they're providing to victims of labor trafficking. So from my perspective, I just wanted to reflect. I think it went really well. I think we set it up as best as we possibly could. So hopefully they move the Dash amendments into the House bill and we get these 2 buckets within the program filled up back up so we can continue to provide these quality services. So I thought I should just say that at some point, and this seemed like a logical place to say it.
Thank you, Rob. It's very much appreciated. And again, this will be a conversation for when we do know that final, 2025-27 biennium amount. There's an allotment for CBOs in that -1 amendment if it gets approved, but that $7.5 million that we have already doesn't have any, it's not allocated to anything yet. So there, you have a little wiggle room there, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Any other comments or questions at the moment? Nope. All right. Everyone is just ready to get through this meeting. It's Friday afternoon. So hopefully, again, this will be familiar to most of you folks. We're just going to go through the roles and responsibilities that the GRC has in the application review process. So as I mentioned, CJC staff, we do that preliminary review. Then you folks come in, you evaluate adherence to the rules and program preferences. You discuss all the applications and you provide recommendations to the commission. And then the commission also does their analysis, and they're the ones that make the ultimate funding recommendations for who to award. Just a heads up, we always want to make sure that you folks are aware of any potential conflicts, and that's actual or potential conflicts, and those occur when a public official participates in an action which would or could result in financial benefit or loss to the official. And just if you feel that you have any conflicts, make sure to disclose that to staff and make sure to not participate in any deliberations on an application or vote on an application where you have those actual or potential conflicts. So once we get to the next GRC meeting that we're going to schedule, just keep that in mind and let us know if you have conflicts. So again, the purpose of this is to show you, this meeting today is to show you all what we have in the RFGP and then give you an opportunity to make requests of other things to include in the staff analysis. Things that you can make recommendations are types of information that you want to see in the presentation that we do when we do those GRC meetings, how the priorities are applied, and what that really means is if there were anything that you want to highlight on the slides that you think would be important in your decision-making process when you're comparing all these applications. As I mentioned, the commission was interested in performance of our current grantees. So, we haven't quite figured out what it's going to look like, but the slide is going to the slides for each applicant is going to highlight, maybe how many incidents the grantee had, how much seizures they had, other types of things like that. We usually highlight the program description, and once we get to the budget, in the final application, we highlight the budget. So those are the types of information that we generally have on slides. We could put other things that were included in the RFGP front and center for you guys to focus on, if that makes sense. Things that are out of scope are any additional criteria not already included, and any information provided by the applicant that isn't part of the criteria or that you asked in response to the application but wasn't in the RFGP, so we can't apply that information across all applicants. So is there anything else or any information that you think is really important to include that you guys want to focus on in the next GRC meeting in these applications that will be helpful when you make your recommendations?
Would it be possible to see how much of the previous grant, if they're repeat applicants, to see how much of the previous grant they actually spent and what and then again, like what the outcomes were?
Okay, so expenditures. Yeah. And this will only be applicable to grantees we've already funded. So new applicants we won't have that information, obviously.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And Rob? Looks like your hand's up.
Yeah, so I'll just add for what it's worth, although it won't talk about the latest cycle. The CJC did file a report in January covering previous cycles that show essentially the data you're looking for previous cycles. We'll want it again, of course, and that's also posted if you're interested under testimony in the House Bill 5005 oldest entry. It's a fairly lengthy report, 30 pages, but it's got lots of great charts.
Thank you for that. Yes, our annual report is available and shows a lot of this information. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, please do, but we can always, include some of those highlights in this presentation as well in the analysis process for the grantees that are reapplying. Anything else that folks would like to see? Oh, you guys are so easy. The last group I did this with came with lists. All right. So on that note, we'll try and include some of that expenditure data. We'll try and include some of the performance data, and then, the responses to the questions that are in the application, in the application. Okay. So other considerations to keep in mind is just the extended timeline for application review. So this, to me, is very beneficial because it gives you folks a chance to really review everything that was submitted in that program narrative portion of the application and ask any questions that you have, and gives the applicants time to respond. And I think that really helps with our understanding of what they're trying to say and making sure that they are complying with all those eligibility requirements and all of that. Another piece that has been coming up recently, and we're hopeful to start, being able to flesh out a little bit more, is this definition of what a successful program looks like. So I just wanted to include that so that can kind of start percolating in your mind. We have a lot of data at this point, and we get that question a lot of what is a successful, marijuana program. And we're starting to have enough data where we can, kind of hone in and see how we want to define that. So I wanted to keep that in mind as well. So now we are at the public comment period, and we are way ahead of schedule. We're just running through everything. So hopefully the folks that wanted to make public comments are here. I know we had at least one. So let's go ahead and take 5 minutes for public comment. And Corinna, it looks like your hand is up.
Sorry, I'm not so familiar with Microsoft Teams. Well, I just want to thank you all for your work on this. And my name is Corinna Spencer-Sherrick. I'm an attorney and the director of the Northwest Workers Justice Project. And we receive funding through the grant as a sub-grantee of Willamette Valley Law Project, which anchors the Cannabis Worker Resilience Partnership. And as many of you know, that's the collaboration of 7 community-based organizations, mental health providers, legal service organizations that provides financial assistance, education, outreach, mental health counseling, and legal advice and representation to workers across the state who have been trafficked or defrauded in the illegal marijuana industry. And I kind of just wanted to back up some, I know this decision is not going to be made today, but I wanted to back up what Rob and Rima said around funding specifically for CBOs to encourage you to designate some of the funds that are going to be carried over to grant to CBOs to address the humanitarian crisis. As Rob mentioned, we're asking legislature to direct specifically 1.7 million to CBOs, but that alone won't cover the current funding. We have, over the last 2 years, we've provided direct legal services to over 700 low-wage immigrant workers who have been recruited primarily from our farm worker communities, and they're usually recruited to plant, harvest, or process illegal marijuana with the promise of legal marijuana or hemp employment. And the funding currently funds statewide 24 lawyers, paralegals, outreach workers, and mental health providers to not only work to address the negative impacts of the legal marijuana industry, but also to get the word out to warn our farm worker community about the dangers of being recruited. And our work is really just getting started. This was a brand new project that we started from scratch. And not only have we gotten this kind of big operation up and running, but we are really now armed with substantial information about how the industry works, who and how they recruit to work in it, and how our regulatory systems has gaps that facilitate the issues that we're seeing. And I know our law enforcement partners are working really hard to respond to the crisis, and their actions have had effect. But the legal operations have gotten smaller. They move around more. They've moved out of the counties that are most equipped to respond. And in short, illegal marijuana is not going away. So our project, really looking forward, is going to be trying to work with our state agencies, BOLI, OSHA, Department of Agriculture, OLCC, and the legislature to try to look for trends and enforcement solutions to problems that workers are facing. And I think we can help create better coordination that will make Oregon an unfriendly or a bad place for illegal operations and help slow the industry. So we think that really a 3.5, 1.7 that if the legislature gives us, plus an additional 1.7 of the funds carried over, if we can designate those to CBOs, with that 3.4 million combined over the next biennium, we'll be able to continue to provide those critical supports to trafficked and defrauded workers. So just to push, I appreciate all the work you're doing, and I know you all have a lot of work and competing needs, but I just wanted to kind of echo what Rob and Rima said about thinking about how CBOs play an important role, not only to address what the problems are, but trying to look for solutions that we can stop illegal marijuana from flourishing in Oregon. Thanks for the time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anyone else? We still have a couple minutes left in the public comment period. Give it a few more seconds before we move on. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands up or anyone else stepping forward, so we're going to close out the public comment period. So now all we have to discuss are next steps. As I mentioned, the request for grant proposals is slated to open May 1st. We'll have a webinar going through that for applicants mid or late May, whenever we're able to schedule it. So the only thing really left on our agenda today is to schedule that next grant, should be GRC, excuse me, Grant Review Committee meeting to review those preliminary applications. And again, we want to do that after the first date when the preliminary application is due, so anytime after June 12th. We can do that through, a poll like we usually do, or we can schedule it now, whichever folks will prefer. Okay, we'll send out a poll then. You guys are usually very responsive to those, so we really appreciate that. That is not true with all of our grant programs. So thank you for, consistently attending and helping out with this grant program. Any questions or comments or concerns before we close out the meeting? No? All right. Well, as I said, look for that poll to set the date for that next GRC meeting. We'll send out announcements when we open the RFGP on May 1st. Please share them broadly with anyone that you think would benefit from possibly applying for this grant program. And thank you guys so much again for all your support, for attending these meetings, for giving that great testimony yesterday. We really appreciate it at CJC. And we are ending way earlier than expected, so enjoy your Friday afternoon. Hopefully you don't have too much work left. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.